the Rings of Power wrapped up, man. I mean, 8 episode first season. We now know who Sauron was, and it's not who we thought. Um,
Who among us is it
yeah,
Sauron, right?
yeah. We all have a little Sauron in us, right? Um, yeah. I mean, maybe we'll just start with the simple question: do you think the Rings of Power season one was successful in doing what
Hell
it needed
yeah.
to
Hell yeah. I love this show, man.
do?
I thought this was a great fun, and I really am intrigued for what's to come. I'm even more excited for season 2, given what we've got. Are there hiccups? Are there less effective things in the Rings of Power season 1? Yes, definitely. It's not perfect, but I think largely where it gets to, what it does accomplish is successful, and I think a great place to leave off a season and start a new season. And yeah, I just really enjoyed being in the world of Middle Earth once again, being with many characters I know, some I don't know. Yeah, I just had a great time, and really can't wait for the next one. Apparently, actually, I was mistaken last time around. They really weren't that deep into season 2. They've only just started production earlier this
Hmm.
year, or sorry, earlier this month in the UK, actually, not New Zealand right now. So I don't know if we're going to get this show back next year. It might not be till 2024, but it'll be eagerly anticipated by me because I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I thought the show was a lot of fun as well. I really I think enjoyed the way that the characters grew on me. I think that there was a part of me that around like episode like 3 or 4 was like, there hasn't been a lot of like movement here. Like I felt like there wasn't like significant movement in the story. We spent a lot of time with Durin, with Galadriel, kind of like working out their friendship. You have you have uh I'm forgetting his name. The guy who ends up being Sauron. Sorry,
Halbrand.
Halbrand. Sorry, yeah. Now I'm just thinking about him as Sauron and Galadriel, and like them kind of figuring out their relationship
Yep.
and
In Numenor for a
being
long time.
yeah in Numenor as prisoners. And I'm like, like where is this really all going? But then I feel like it really pays off in the second half of the season. You get like the moment between um, Elrond and Durin when Elrond is like, I didn't realize I was put on this mission, but for this reason, but this is why I was put on this mission, and I need you to like help me save the elves, like the
Yeah.
our entire race. And like that moment between them is you're just like on the edge of your seat, like is he actually gonna go for this, or is he gonna like turn him away? And like I felt
Hmm.
like that was so powerful and strong. I feel like the payoff that leads up to episode 6 when everything comes together and the battle of Middle Earth there is just
Yep.
completely like maybe one of
Great.
the best episodes of TV of the year in my opinion. Just an amazing cat, like the way that they shot that and like edited it all
Yeah.
together.
Set
It's
piece after
just
set piece in the Southlands.
so good. um and then I really like how we got to the rings, and probably
Hmm.
my least favorite storyline, which is the Harfoots, I think had some of the like strongest emotional impact on me at the end of the season. So I was just
Yeah.
like overall found it to be a really successful season. I do agree with some of the critiques about like some of the writing, especially around like making sense of Halbrand's actions, if he knows he's Sauron or is like aware of it. I think that there's some like
Sauron is a
motivation
deceiver,
questions.
baby.
Yeah,
I agree. It
maybe.
could have been communicated, I think, a little bit better. It's a bit of a challenge. For me, I'm willing to let it slide and I think see season 2 kind of color that in a little bit more. Um, because yeah, the way a lot of it's framed is you're putting a lot of onus on Galadriel, which doesn't seem right in terms of
Mhm.
our understanding of these two characters, right? So I agree. It is a weaker piece of the season, but I'm willing to let it go. Um, yeah, I think that's another piece about this too. Is like the Rings of Power. Yes, Second Age. Before Lord of the Rings, but like ultimately, we know everything that's going to happen. We know the fate of anyone we've met before. This is all known. Elendil, Isildur, Galadriel, Durin, Elrond. We know these people.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, you probably noticed the Southlands is going to become Mordor. You know what? That big mountain in the back, that's probably Mount Doom. Shocker, right? It's like, I'm kind of happy we got past a lot of these like mysteries or like surprises because ultimately they really can't be surprises. And I
Hmm.
don't think Lord of the Rings needs to be told as a story in a way that's mystery boxy. You know, Tolkien storytelling, fantasy storytelling, is not like Game of Thrones. It's much more earnest and I think of a different tone, right? And the Harfoots slash hobbits are a huge factor in that, right? If we can honestly just not worry about plot so much and actually just be with the characters, I think that's where this show can really shine. Because we know what's going to happen to everyone anyway. So why bother trying to like go down these like what ifs, with plot, right? Like, oh, yes, in Numenor, we know that they have the Palantir, the Seeing Stone. We know that's what was discovered under the blanket. Like, there's no
Hmm.
surprise with any of this, nor does there need to be. I don't need any surprise at all. I just want to be in the world and be with the characters, some of which I know. Like so. I'm hopeful for the future of the series with Sauron's identity more in the open. The Stranger confirmed at least to be an Astari of some kind. He is one of the wizards. Most people
Yeah,
think it's
is he
Gandalf.
gonna be
Doesn't have to be.
Gandalf?
It seems like he's Gandalf. He doesn't have to be Gandalf. He could be. I mentioned in our review of the first two episodes the Blue Wizard characters, which are largely undefined in Tolkien. Maybe he's one of those guys because that could just be a new character for all intents and purposes. I don't know. But yeah, he's one of the wizards for sure.
Hmm.
That is confirmed. Um, yeah, no sense hiding stuff. I think with this show, let's just get into it. And have a
Yeah.
good time.
No, yeah, and I think a very like um satisfying season in my opinion. I mean, like we talked about some of the questions. I think maybe will answer themselves as we move forward, but uh, I think getting a lot of the answers before the end of the first season is really exciting, and I think you kind of see where this is going. I'm really excited to see where the Harfoots with the stranger. I think that's going to be a really fun storyline to follow. I think I'm interested to see what actually happens with the rings next. And how
Hmm.
that's all going to play out with the dwarves. I think that's going to be really interesting dynamic politically. And then we had the king of Numenor. I forgot his name, who dies at the end of
Yes.
this episode. And I think there's going to be obviously some changes come with that. So some really interesting plot lines to be following moving forward.
Right. And I think that's actually one of the most intriguing ones too, is like you can look up what happens to Numenor if you don't already know.
Hmm.
But that's about all we do know, is more or less what happens. We don't know how it gets there. That'll be fun to spend time with.
Yeah.
The Harfoots, I think the Harfoot story was a bit up and down for me in
Hmm.
season one, but I still need the Harfoots in the show because those figures, the hobbits, the Harfoots, are central to Tolkien in terms of
Yeah.
little unimposing people being in this larger fantasy world. Like you said, the
Everyone
emotional beats
matters.
are there. Like, yeah, exactly. Like, huge important component. What happens with Nori and the Stranger? Happy to see it happen. That'll be
Hmm.
great. Um, Another mystery that got out of the way, not a mystery to most, I'm sure, but like in Kaza's Doom, they found the Mithril, but they dug too deep. Obviously, we know they dug too deep. If you watch The Fellowship of the Ring, the Balrog is called Durin's Bane. You know what happens,
Hmm.
but we love Durin. He's
Yep.
so good. Him and Elrond's relationship is amazing. Robert Aramayo is
Yeah.
amazing as Elrond. I want to see that constantly. Let's go, man. They are great, and that'll be great. Obviously, we know the plot down the line, but I don't care about that. It's just because the characters are so good, you know.
Uh,
Um,
how'd you feel about Galadriel throughout the season?
yeah, I think in a sense she was a bit of a open book at this time. Young Galadriel, really not anything defined. So
Hmm.
didn't really know what to expect, and she's definitely has like a steely resolve, a focused direction, purpose in her life, and I don't want to call her one note. I think Morphy Clark is really good as Galadriel, but like I think seeing Galadriel in I think some new situations in season two will probably make the character even stronger on the
Hmm.
series. So I think ultimately she does kind of get like tied up in a lot of like the Numenor stuff where she doesn't get to do a whole lot, or at least not her herself, you know. Um, so yeah, I'm definitely open to seeing more new things for Galadriel in the future, and I'm sure we'll get that. Of course, she's the co-lead with Elrond, really the number one lead of the series. I think the thing that for me most disappointed me about the whole series, which you mentioned as something that's intriguing to follow, right? The rings, right?
Right.
We kind of whipped right into Celebrimbor and Sauron getting into ring making at the end there. I wanted to see Sauron in a Region for so much longer than we ended up getting,
Hmm.
because that's a huge thing, right? About like Sauron kind of like deceptively influencing the elves and Celebrimbor into making the rings in the first place, right? And I would love to see more of that. We didn't really get a whole lot of it. Before you know it, Sauron's already out of a Region and it's over.
Ha-
Um,
Had you
yeah.
figured out that he was Sauron before he revealed it?
As well, so a lot of people had been theorizing this for weeks and weeks, and there were like some like dialogue hints. I wasn't really interested in trying to figure it out, but also I was like, you know what? Maybe that's too easy. Maybe he's going to be the Witch King or a Nazgul or who knows, or he's somebody new. I don't know. I wasn't really
Mhm.
thinking about it too much, but as soon as I saw Halbrand kind of like pacing in the ring lab talking to Celebrimbor, I'm like, up, yep,
There we
confirmed,
go.
it's him. No more doubt.
Yeah.
Especially because right along that time, you have these like cultist characters, which I think are pretty weak villains. You have them being like, "Stranger, you are Sauron. Be our leader." You know, it's like, okay, well, clearly they're doing this because he's not Sauron. You know, like
Are you
at
talking
that point, I was
about
like, okay, it's pretty clear.
Adar as an Aruk?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I I actually found him to be a pretty intriguing character, Adar. I think he was played a very like menacing villain.
Hmm.
Um, I
Looks
I'm
cool.
in, and I really watching his interaction with Halbrand. When they capture him and thinking about the fact that Halbrand, knocks him off the horse or knocks the horse down, so he falls down. They stop him from getting the
Hmm.
top of the scepter or whatever it is.
Yep,
Um,
the dark elf figure here.
yeah, I thought was pretty like interesting to think about in retrospect. How he's like, "Do you remember me? Like, do you know who I am?" Like, I thought that was like a really fascinating scene to think about in retrospect, and I wonder if they're going to now obviously team up. I mean, this seems like there's
Hmm.
some sort of movement. I think like the one thing I'm a little like sad about is like, what is there really for us to follow with Sauron now that he's just kind of like, yeah, I'm bad now. Like
Yeah,
he
great.
just kind of sidelined.
Great question. So I think ultimately we're going to see him like be able to make the one ring. I'm curious how long that happens, and I'm just kind of curious like how long does it take until we're in like kind of the open conflict like Second Age Endgame. You know,
Hmm.
if you watch the Fellowship of the Ring, the very first scene is that extended flashback narrated by Galadriel. That's what we are building to on this series, and I'm just curious how long does it take us to get there, right? Because there'll be some inciting incidents. What happens to Numenor? The Balrog in Moria, and then Sauron just starting to go on his attack. Like we know the key beats that haven't happened yet, but in the meantime, I'll be really excited to see like Elendil and Isildur found Gondor. That
Hmm.
hasn't happened yet. That'll be cool. You know, but yeah, in terms of Sauron, like apart from making the ring, it's again kind of an open book. So it's up to the showrunners to find stuff to
Figure out.
do. And I wonder how big of a character he will be. Will we see Sauron as much as we saw Halbrand this season?
Right.
I don't know.
Also, kind of funny that Sauron's just hot. Like you never really know what he looks like, and now you're just like, oh, he's just a really hot guy. Like,
He
cool.
was a deceiver, man. He can switch up his look. That was his
Yeah.
thing.
Um, I would say Rings of Power pretty successful for first season. I think it did everything you want. I'm invested in a lot of these characters and
Yeah,
excited for whenever we get season two. Any last thoughts for you though?
yeah. No, I totally agree about that. There was so much hype and build up and lead time to this series, and we know about the price tags and the
Hmm.
expectations put on it by Amazon. And like we said, there are flaws, there are things to improve on, but I think it's definitely a successful show. And I mean, in terms of the fantasy realm, it's this and Thrones. I think most people are going to start giving up in terms of making the next Thrones because there's no room. We have
Yeah.
House of the Dragon and Rings of Power, and that's enough, I think.